By surrounding yourself in enough networks like that, you end up inevitably giving yourself a stroke of luck that you wouldn't have otherwise. The seafood supply chain was very inefficient, a lot of middlemen, very opaque as well for end consumers. So we just started digging deeper, skipping classes in university and flying out to Boston and trying to talk to customers and pitch our product.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the AI Founders Podcast. My name is Jade. I am your host and also the founder and CEO of an AI product studio called Casper Studios. Today we spoke with Joseph Lee. Joseph is the CEO and co-founder of SupaDemo. SupaDemo helps companies create better product demos with AI. They have over 20,000 marketers, CSMs, and founders across 75 countries that leverage a product to be able to enable customers to scale product adoption and close more deals. We had a wide-ranging conversation, spoke about how he dropped out of college to be able to start his previous company, what it was like to be a Thiel Fellow, some of the insights that he had to start this second company, his transition away from his first company to this company, and also some of the potential risks that come with building AI functionality and how AI is impacting society and the workforce. Hope you enjoy the conversation.
How you doing, man?
Hey, good. How are you?
Doing well. Excited to hop on the podcast with a fellow Canadian and fellow UBCer and fellow Sauder undergrad, but someone who didn't end up actually finishing the UBC and Sauder. but we went to the same school together at some point in time, I suppose.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to hear that story a little bit later as well, of what you were thinking and like some of the ramifications of that. You hear about dropping out kind of vibe for founders all the time, but I want to know more about what the reality was, like what the trade-offs were, everything. We can get into that later. First, one way I like to start the podcast is by asking our guests what was the first way that they made money. It ends up kind of like dictating a lot of other future entrepreneurial adventures. And so for you, what was that?
Yeah, no, I think the first $1,000 that I made was probably from buying and selling electronics on Craigslist. So having watched Dragon's Den, I think I got enamored with the concept of being able to make something from nothing. And, having saved up a decent amount of birthday cash over the years, I decided to get into the market of buying and selling and arbitraging phones and tablets and computers. So it was funny. I don't know how I chanced upon the opportunity, but I would end up buying bulk electronics, 10 phones at a time, 5 phones at a time, a couple tablets at a time, and I would resell them on Craigslist. So I would be driving with an N, which is a novice driver for Canadians in British Columbia. And I would drive down to these random parking lots in the middle of the night or go to these weird crack house communities and walk in and try to sell tablets for double the markup. I ended up doing that for a couple of years, and it ended up paying for a decent portion of my college that I didn't finish, as you alluded to.
It's an interesting feeling when you're that young and you're starting to make money, and maybe a lot of your friends are more focused on. So when you came back from all those interesting spots that you were in and telling your friends about, oh my God, this is working. How did they look at you? Were they looking at you weird? Did you have to kind of work through that? Because I the first few dollars I made outside of a day job myself, it was almost like me trying to kind of convince them that whatever I was doing was legitimate. Did you kind of go through that initially when you were starting off?
Yeah, well, first of all, my girlfriend at the time did not like the fact that I was doing this because I dragged her along, and I would go to some sketchy spots and she'd be like, can we not do this? So kudos to her wherever she is in the world for coming with me. And it's not for me, not wanting a full-time job. Honestly, I had applied everywhere. I wanted to go work and get real life experience. I don't think people wanted to hire too many 15, 14, 16-year-olds back then. So I just kind of had to make do with what opportunities were in front of me. And that was buying and selling electronics.
And then you end up doing an internship at Shell. And then it seems like later that year, you end up taking a jump into entrepreneurship. So walk me through what was going on in your head at that point.
Yeah.
What were the different kind of points of transition? What were the pieces
Hmm.
of inspiration? What was happening there? Maybe giving the backstory before then too.
Yeah. So I kind of put a pin in entrepreneurship. Back then, I think I bought into the notion that you had to get real world experience, like a lot of people, before jumping into startups. So the plan was to get as wide of an array of experience as possible through internships. So I ended up working at an ed tech company as an intern, and then I worked at a sports technology company, and then I worked at Shell, which is very, very different from everything else. The great thing about the opportunity at that last internship is it gave me so much time and latitude to go out and explore in the evenings and kind of get a pulse of what I wanted to do and dip my toes into the world of tech as well. So yeah, I went to a bunch of hackathons. I ended up going and winning like three different hackathons with our team, one in San Francisco, one in Seattle, and another one in San Mateo. Yeah, and that exposure and I think that experience networking and meeting so many people across the globe made me realize, hey, I actually want to get into startups and I want to get into tech specifically rather than consulting or banking or all the other jobs that business tries to push down your throat when you're in business school, right?
And then what was the next set of steps? You go on to start a company called Freshline.
Yeah,
You also were a Thiel Fellow. That's pretty
yeah.
cool. Like, what was the story there? How did you get
So
started? Like,
yeah,
how did that company end up scaling
so the company
for
was
8 years?
initially called Coastline Market, and the thesis was, how can we democratize the access to small scale fishermen and let them sell direct to both consumers and to businesses while bypassing the middleman. And really, the idea came from my co-founder of another venture back in high school. We started making soy candles together and selling them to retail market. That's another story, but he ended up going to Western University. I ended up going to UBC. And in the summer that I was working at Shell, he, myself, and one other early co-founder came together to kind of ideate on this. And it was him harkening back on his experiences in the Maritimes, Robert, my co-founder, of talking to fishermen and them saying, hey, I have to go dock to dock to dock in each small village selling bits and pieces of my catch because I'm getting pennies on the dollar when I go and sell to the broker and I can't make ends meet. So we started exploring and researching, why is this the case? Why are people going through all this pain and kind of hard work instead of just selling to the broker? And we realized that the seafood supply chain was very inefficient, a lot of middlemen, very opaque as well for end consumers. And we just started digging deeper, skipping classes in university and flying out to Boston and trying to talk to customers and pitch our product. And it ended up evolving from there. We ended up doing a pre-seed, we did a seed round, went through Techstars, on the verge of essentially signing our Series A term sheet and scaling this thing. And COVID hit, pretty much all restaurants shut down. And at the time, we were building North America's first demand driven marketplace for seafood, connecting seafood companies, fishermen directly to restaurants. And we were handling all the logistics of getting fish from point A to B to C to D. And did a big pivot, and the company eventually became Freshline, and the company's chugging along today, profitable and growing.
What was the story with the Thiel Fellowship? Did you end up joining that early on, or what was that like? It feels like it's this like cool like Illuminati type vibe where all these extremely smart founders are all joining and end up like running everything around the world. But how did you? What was your experience with that?
Yeah, so in our year, we basically had one representative join from each company. So we had my co-founder join. So him and I flew down to the fellowship summit in San Francisco and met a ton of different people and just did interviews and met a lot of the luminaries. I think it was pretty eye-opening in terms of the expectations that you place upon yourself and realizing that all these people that you thought were on another pedestal are actually not so different from you after all. They come from similar walks of life, similar levels of intelligence. They're really not that different. And I think being side by side with them in lockstep and having beers together and going out and eating together and talking about your businesses together, I think it increases your level of ambition and what your belief in what you can achieve in the world. So I think whether it's the Thiel Fellowship or Forbes or Techstars YC, there's a lot of communities out there. Surrounding yourself with really smart people, ambitious people, is the best way to learn and just increase your expectations through osmosis, right?
I want to touch on the idea of kind of like these external communities and external validation, how it then impacts your own psychology. It seems like one of the learnings was that everybody's all kind of the same. I think that makes a ton of sense. Curious, like what else you gleaned from maybe not just the Thiel Fellowship, from Forbes 30 under 30, all these other really awesome accolades, and like how are you feeling personally like through that experience? Just for the audience, the Thiel Fellowship, Peter Thiel, early PayPal, goes on to invest into Facebook and has massive successful venture capital firm, started the Thiel Fellowship for I think like I don't know if there's like an age limit to it or anything, but at least the people that ended up joining, like you got like Vitalik Buterin, the founder of Ethereum. You got Dylan Field, the CEO of Figma, founder of Figma, like a bunch of other like really awesome people. So it makes sense that when you go down and you meet them, you look up to them a bunch, and they're still awesome and great to look up to. But then you end up realizing that actually you like they're smart and hardworking, but you could probably also do the same thing. It's at different micro levels in my own life, I've experienced that where I'm like, wow, this person I looked up to for so long, and I still look up to them, but I could probably do that as well over time, and they could help me as well, which is pretty exciting.
I think another thing, I think the big takeaway you also realize is it takes a lot of luck in order to be successful in entrepreneurship. A lot of it is the product you're building, the industry you're building in, confluence of so many factors that are both in your control and out of your control as well. You obviously need to seize luck and seize opportunity and run with it. But, I think the biggest impetus is to me even moving to the United States from Canada is how do I surround myself and increase my surface area for luck and just bumping into really smart, ambitious people that could change the trajectory of what I'm building and what I'm doing. And networks like that are going to just increase those odds dramatically compared to, not branching out and not extending out your network. It's not going to be like some overnight light switch where your life is different from point A to point B. But I think by surrounding yourself in enough networks like that, you end up inevitably giving yourself a stroke of luck that you wouldn't have otherwise.
Give me a fun story about that stroke of luck happening from like a network or a community that you're like, oh my God, what just happened? Like this wouldn't have happened unless I met this person for coffee and then introduced me for this person for drinks. And then like I ended up meeting them at an event. Like it's hard to even sometimes look back and like feel back how you interact with people. Like how did this happen? But do you remember anything that kind of sticks out to you?
I can't think of like a person specific scenario, but if I had to pick one event where us saying like, fuck it, let's just do it. And like, we went to an event and something happened was when we actually skipped school and like booked tickets to Boston to essentially try to sell our product walking like the show floor of the world's biggest seafood expo. And we had like a brochure, not even a working product at the time. And like we were walking around, definitely illegal. We shouldn't have been doing that, but we were walking the show floor, just trying to sell people on our platform at the time. And we got zero customers. But I think by booking the ticket and going and just putting ourselves out there, what happened was on my return flight, I was in the queue for security at the airport. I was talking to someone else on our team on the phone about, Coastline Market and what we were building and what our priorities were. And the guy behind me was like a CEO of one of the biggest scallop farms in Nova Scotia. And he was like, yo, I like overheard you. Like I'm looking for that exact thing. Let's link up and I'm going to be like a beta tester, beta user. And yeah, he ended up being our first customer.
Yeah, there's so much randomness of just putting yourself out there and then letting people know what you're doing. Or speaking loudly at an airport and making sure everybody else also can hear what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then it starts to really flow in a really interesting way. That's an awesome story. What ended up kind of like happening with Coastline and then turned into the Freshline? You end up starting the company and then you end up leaving the company to be able to work on the next company, which I'm excited to learn about. But what was the transition like after you work on something for so many years?
Yeah.
You put like, you know, yourself into it. You started this young. And so it's hard not to even like associate some of your identity with that as well. And so how
Yeah.
did you transition out of that? What was the kind of like inspiring point for you to do that? Any learnings, lessons, like reflections to that process?
Yeah. Really, really tough process, as you mentioned, Jay. I think when you're building your first company, the company is you, you are the company, your identity is so etched into the fabric of being a founder, being an entrepreneur, and, you know, with your company. So I think stepping back, I think you have a lot of imposter syndrome, right? You're a jack of all trades. You wear many different hats. You don't even know what role you would slide into. Do you start a new company? Do you join as a product manager? Are you a marketer? Are you an operator? It's this vast unknown that you have no experience in. So it can be quite daunting. And it's also really hard to kind of, for the very first time, try to make the right decision for yourself and not necessarily for the company. Because I think you always put the company first in whatever you do. And you do that for so many years. It's hard to just say, hey, I know it might be painful for the company, but I need to take a step back for my well being, for my future, my health, and just move on. But making that decision and getting the timing right is really hard. You think that maybe you sometimes even overvalue your importance in the company and think, hey, if I leave, this is going to be catastrophic and things are going to fall apart and I'm going to destroy things. But in reality, I think your co-founders, your team, your company is resilient and they're going to find a way through it all and succeed. So I would, if I had to give any recommendations to anyone in similar positions and even to myself in the past, would be just to rip the band-aid off. Give notice to your co-founder. I gave plenty of notice, half a year's notice about my departure, but just be decisive and make the decision, because in the long run, I think it's going to be the best decision for both yourself and the company. It's better for the company to have more of a focused team that is bought in and really wants to live, breathe the company. And obviously, if you have a good relationship with your co-founder, they want you to be happy, right? They want you to be successful in whatever you end up doing, whether it's a job or another company, right?
I love that. I'll ask one more question on this kind of transitionary point, because I think
Yeah.
it's not spoken about that readily and openly because it's a sensitive topic. I feel like people don't really know how to. I think I would summarize it in like two ways. Like one, they don't know if the reason that they want to leave is the right reason or not. And they feel like maybe they're betraying the team or betraying the vision or themselves. And then like how to be able to communicate that really well to the team, and then how to do it, when to do it. What was the reasoning of why? Was it just, you know, I want to go try something else? Was it like, I'm getting bored, like AI is picking up, I want to go do that? Like what was the motivation behind it? Yeah, but yeah, super curious to learn about
Yeah.
that.
I think it was a confluence of many different factors, but I think one of them was, you know, I had built this company for, at that time, 6 years in totality. And, you know, it was pretty much my first like real at bat, made a lot of mistakes and just kind of ran into entrepreneurship blindly. So there was a lot of things that I wanted to do from like an industry, product, go to market, engineering standpoint that realistically I couldn't really execute upon because there was a lot of baggage having built something for a very, very long time, right? For me, I had always kind of optimized for like growth, learning, and impact, and felt like not that that wasn't there, but it was weaning and not at the level that I really wanted it to be, especially considering we had gone through this kind of massive pivot a few years back. We had transitioned from this kind of high growth, high burn, but high velocity startup to this like very slow and steady, profit focused, slow and steady growth company, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but there was a, you know, an alignment issue, I think, with what I wanted in my future career. And I think if you have a really good partnership and relationship with your co-founder, like you're going to be able to communicate that like early and often and get into alignment and agree on what is actually fair for both parties. So I was very open to my co-founder's feedback on what the transition could look like. what I was willing to give up or kind of give back to the company as well, despite being there for 6+ years. And yeah, because I had communicated like early and often about how I was feeling, even before letting my co-founder know about my departure, when I did tell him, it was very clear. He knew it was coming at that point. And, it just came down to logistics of like, when is the right timing to leave? When is the right timing to tell other employees? How do we tell them? Et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
Thanks for opening up about that.
Yeah.
So now you do leave and you want to go start another company. And so let's get into SupaDemo.
Yeah.
What was the inspiration behind that? When were you looking at AI and saying like, holy shit, this is going to really change the game. This is like what I really want to build. How did you go from, I'm projecting on like, I was like a fellow founder. There was like a level of excitement of like, wow, like I just tried this, that is going to unlock these opportunities. And then how did you go from that to then, going through the idea maze and like understanding that this is the right company to be able to build? What is the company doing? What's the product doing? Let's get into that.
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is I didn't walk into this like vast unknown with like preconceived notions of wanting to build in like one space or another. I call this period of like 4 months wandering the wilderness. I was just trying to figure out like, what does the future look like for me? But one of those like early bursts of excitement was definitely when like ChatGPT came out en masse, and it was kind of like a WTF moment. You're like, how, right? In terms of the problem space, opportunity spaces, I was looking at a bunch, and I kind of ran like a process of elimination with many different ideas, many different co-founders. But one of the problems that I had at my last company was when we had pivoted from this B2B marketplace model to B2B SaaS, it really came down to just hitting the phone line and like calling as many people as possible and just trying to get people on demos. One of the struggles was, how do we explain and demonstrate our products, our features, our benefits as to why they should care in an easy to understand and engaging way, especially for such an esoteric industry specific product? Because when we pivoted, we became essentially Shopify for food distributors. That's what Freshline is. How do we actually do that? I experimented with creating videos, creating slideshows, doing all the different types of things, but it just didn't hit the mark. And it was so resource intensive, especially for a high velocity startup like us, where the product was changing so often and I was just redoing the same thing over and over and over again. But one of the aha moments that I had is when I got on a one-on-one screen sharing session just like this, and I walked through the magic of our product step by step and let them interact and kind of ask questions and go back and forth. That's when they got that light bulb moment. They're like, holy shit, I need this for my company. How can I get started? So I knew that there was a gap there. I knew that there was a better way that companies could demonstrate and enable their own customers and needs on their product. I just didn't know what that solution was. And when I met Kaushik, who is also a repeat entrepreneur, and he had been kind of in the product demo video space for a very long time with a successful company of his own, we clicked right away and we're like, holy crap, this can be like an amazing opportunity. And AI amplifies the value that we are already delivering and just makes that value moment so much faster and so much deeper for our customers. And what we do at SupaDemo, we help companies create better product demos using AI. So we have an intuitive Chrome extension and a desktop app. You turn it on and you basically walk through any product or workflow, and our platform automatically converts it into this step-by-step interactive product demo that you can use across sales enablement, follow-ups, marketing websites, onboarding. You can use it in-app or out-of-app, anywhere you need to drive enablement, adoption, close more deals. So yeah, we work with over 20,000 users across 100 different countries. They've been growing super quickly.
That's exciting. How did you start growing? What's been the kind of go-to-market plan? Like, was it focused on a few beta customers, roll out? Like, did you launch this and people just were like, holy shit, like started using it? How have you guys been growing the company?
In the very early stages, I think to give it some juice, I think it's all about doing things that don't scale. So as much as people hate outbound, you got to do it. You got to like reach out to people and do the work for them. So that was the main thing for us. It's, hey, how do we identify high value target customers and do the work for them? Let's create a product demo for them, like of the new features. Let's sign up and let's actually look through their product and create the tutorial and add value in the initial message saying, hey, like Jake, we basically just did this like product demo for you. I think it would look really good embedded on your product updates. Do you want to try it out? Right. So I think little things like that, I think when compounded can make a huge difference. And then from then on, I think now it's just pure product led demos by their very own nature are viral. So you create product demos or product tutorials, product guidance to share with customers, to share with leads, to share with colleagues. And when someone, clicks through the magic of a SupaDemo instead of like a one-way video monologue, they're like, like how do I use this for my own company? Software companies sell to other software companies typically. And then we make it very, very easy for them to just click, get started. They don't even need to create an account. They can start recording a SupaDemo to accelerate that the time to value moment. And yeah, if they enjoy what they see, they can sign up and get enrolled into a trial, start creating their own demos, and it's a cycle from there.
So the insight is if product-led growth helps if the product you're demonstrating and sharing is a beautiful product and people want to interact with it and explore it. So unpack that a little bit. Did that just happen happenstance, or were you intentional about actually we want to build a product that in itself is baking in some level of like growth loops because the visual representation of the product actually is just going to be beautiful. So people want to share it. Were you thinking about that early on? It's really interesting.
Yeah, 100%. I think you need to think about the virality and the loop mechanism across the entire flow. So like every little piece that you see on our platform has been like methodically thought out all the way from the initial funnel of what they see on the website down to the onboarding flow of previously we used to force people to create a SupaDemo right in the onboarding so that they could get that value moment, even if it created a little bit of friction, forcing people to invite their team or making it really easy for them to invite their team members all across the platform to drive that land and expand motion. And having a very generous free plan as well that has kind of that SupaDemo branding and watermark, and being able to identify like who's actually driving it, which customers within the free plan are driving the most growth, and being able to A/B test different messaging, different watermarks, different tooltips to get more customers through the door.
As you've been building it, what have you been learning about the AI landscape and what are people missing about it? What's something that people don't really understand unless they're actually building a company in the space, in your perspective?
I think what the general public fails to understand is you can pretty much do anything, like literally anything with AI. I think one of the challenges that I face, and I'm sure a lot of other AI founders face as well, things are moving at such a breakneck speed and things are changing so quickly. I struggle to find the right tools for my use case. Like I know that you can have amazing AI, avatars, or I know you can do these different types of things, but I have no idea how to like prompt my model or prompt the search engine to find those results. Because everything kind of you see in passing on Twitter for like a second, and then you get busy and you can never find it again. And maybe that's why like companies like Recall are successful, or that like memory company. I don't even know what it's called, but yeah, you can pretty much do anything. I like to use like standard Claude, OpenAI, and Perplexity to do most of the work I need to do, whether it's like code generation, templating, content reviews. Like I use it very, very frequently in my day-to-day workflow. And obviously we have AI embedded like deeply within our own product, and that enables in turn like tens of thousands of users every single day.
And with the AI integrated into the product, am I assuming it's like, how have you structured that? Is it, I want to be able to create a demo. I can, through a voice or through written content, give this product a bunch of different insight, and then it starts to generate visual representations, or is it just text representations, or like how's the actual like system working in the back end?
the visual representation is really, really tough. And I think that's the
Yeah.
vision of where we want to take it. So imagine a world where a salesperson or a marketer no longer is guessing what the customer wants to know about or what they value through actual cold hard data, whether it's through mixed panel or amplitude. They can take in and parse all of that user data and create the optimal user onboarding flow or a sales demo or a tutorial on how to like do a workflow. That is going to be revolutionary. We're not quite there yet. That's very complex. But that is the future that we want to build towards. And that can be done with AI. Today, we have like just scratched the surface of what's possible. With our AI model, there are a few different ways we can amplify the product demo experience. One of them is auto generating all of the caption text in every single slide so that you give contextual guidance to the demo viewer. So we are able to actually parse in the screenshot of each of the slides, as well as the DOM of what the person clicked. And using that and combining it with text-based prompts, we're able to make that a lot more descriptive, illustrative, so that they've essentially saved the demo creator. They've essentially saved hours on it, right? You can then translate that to another language if you want to then roll out internationalization, and you can overlay like synthetic voiceovers in many, many different languages.
What's the most used feature right now? Are you surprised by that, or is it kind of designed?
I would say the AI voiceover is kind of the standout feature. So we use a bunch of different models for that, depending on different accents and different languages. But I think still to this day, people are most impressed with the realism and the variety of voices that are available on the platform. I think us as AI founders, it's easy to sometimes be in an echo chamber and say everyone knows that you can have synthetic AI voices and it's realistic. But you give this to a teacher, or you give this to a customer success manager, maybe in a less tech forward role. And to them, this is this amazing innovation that's saving them like hours and hours and hours every single week.
I love that. Riverside, where we're recording this, I was trying that actually myself, because you can like, it's collecting all my audio obviously and yourself as well. And so you can then like type in and it starts to speak. And it sounds pretty accurate actually. Like there's probably like, because we're in it enough that we can sense that it's like a little bit AI generated, but it's not. It already, you could pass the test. Especially 100%. If you don't, especially if you haven't heard the person communicate too often. And are you worried about that in any way? That feels a little scary. I don't know why, but like calling your mom or something and like it being like sounding like Joseph. And like, I mean, that like I've had to personally set a safety word with our family already. And like that conversation was like pretty trippy.
That is very trippy.
You're like, this is the safety word. And now I'm like, I hope you all remember the safety word. But the fact that we have to start thinking about that stuff is a little concerning. So as someone who's like really on the cutting edge of a lot of these different interactions with AI, like how are you thinking through like some of the scary parts of it, or is the reality of like, I'm just trying to build, like I can't really think about this.
It is a little bit unnerving, and I am a little worried about certain aspects of society. I think the way things are going, unless we have the right controls and governance in place, I think the gap and the disparity between the haves and have-nots is going to become even more amplified than it already is. So how do we build a future in a system where society as a whole evenly benefits from the power of AI? I think that will be a challenge, right? Because if we don't have the governance in place, if we don't have controls in place, if we don't have standards to prevent fraud, impersonation. I mean, you even saw like, there was an AI video about Taylor Swift endorsing Donald Trump in the next election. Like, how do you actually prevent that from happening? Because we might know that, that's AI generated, but millions and millions of Americans will not. So I think we need to be moving regulation at the same pace as the development and innovation that's happening in the industry, which is very, very hard to do. I don't know if there is a right answer, and there are smart people trying to push the frontiers here, but more has to be done, I think.
It's a tough one.
while I was at LinkedIn, I was getting pitched by a team at Adobe who is behind the content authenticity initiative. They're trying to take a stab at making sure that you can understand if something is AI generated or not. It's a constant, you figure some standard out and be able to work through it, and you have to always improve it. The slide deck was still one of the more, it stuck with me, like a presentation. They weren't building on SupaDemo yet, but the idea that they showed was like this picture of a forest fire. And it was like the forest fire was represented of like a bunch of news articles across the world in terms of their forest fires. So it said, Vancouver forest fire, here's a picture. Brazil forest fire, same picture. New York forest fire, same picture. And you had no idea if that was real or not.
Yeah.
The idea that you don't know if what is real is fake or what is fake is real. And not being able to have ground truth in terms of what you're looking at in terms of reality is probably like one of the biggest problems that our society is facing right now, has already been facing. So
I think it's going to take some like massive kind of inflection point or something really bad to happen for us to reel things back. And this almost reminds me of like the crypto craze. Like there was zero regulations and ICOs left and right. And I was like buying so much coins back in like 2017 myself, right? And it took some really bad things to happen for a government to step in and be like, no, okay, we can't do this. We need regulation. And it's unfortunate that that had to happen, but probably going to be the same thing, honestly, with it. Something bad's going to happen and government's going to step in and be like, no, like we need standards.
So I'm realizing we're at time. I'll let you go. The last piece there, and maybe a point of inspiration for those that are listening that are building AI products. I actually think some of the ownership will go back to the founders building products in the space. Why? Because the teachers that are using your voice cloning technology, it's likely the first time they've ever interacted with it, right? And so the micro moments in products that it doesn't have to be some like technical standard just yet, but even some education to help educate people of what this technology is while they get excited about it, some of the qualms about it. And I think we also hold like some level of responsibility as we're building out those things, to have take on that, because the technology is so new. A lot of the stuff that we're building right now actually will start to get built on top of afterwards. And so encourage those listening and ourselves to take some of the ownership. Obviously, you have to grow the company, you have to do these things. Like it's not only focus on that versus closing customers, but I think that this generation of founders can learn from the previous one, where actually, the things that we're doing will have societal impacts on people. Tech founders have already proven that now. And so I don't know what it is exactly, right? Like it's not like a clear, definitive, this is how to think about things, but just having it percolating in the back of your mind, I think is probably a good thing.
100%.
All right, man. Thanks for coming on.
Cool. Well, thanks for having me.